Greetings, viewers. Chris from Chris Country here. How the heck are you? Today I'm going to go ahead and show you the inner workings of a computer. What makes it run, what certain components do, things like that. I'll be using my lovely, although outdated, HP unit as our little showpiece. I hope you find this information helpful and hopefully even a little entertaining. Here we go. Alrighty gang, so here we have my HP. I'll bring up the side of it over here for you. First big component I'll show you, and the main component of every computer, is this guy right here, your power supply. All computers, cell phones, anything with a computer pretty much runs on electricity. Now I know some of you are going, but Chris, computers are chips and diodes and processors and all that stuff. This is true, but they all run with electricity. And all these processors do is convert the electrical power into binary digits for the computer to run off of. So essentially, your power supply is the heart. It takes AC electrical power from a wall outlet and feeds it to the various components of the computer. The next big part of any computer is, of course, the main board. I see the main board as your central nervous system of the computer. It pretty much holds all of the big components together. It allows all the components to communicate with each other. Here's a couple of the critical parts about a main board. The biggest part, of course, is the processor. All processors, especially newer ones, usually hide underneath a cooling fan. Believe it or not, back when the computers were first coming out, processors used to live just underneath the heatsink alone. But as processors got faster and faster, they got hotter and hotter, thus better cooling systems had to be developed. This part over here is what a lot of techs like to refer to as the input-output board. And this pretty much just has like your serial port drivers, your video drivers, your hookups for your keyboard, things like that. Things that you plug in your accessories to. Next on the docket, in the case of my computer, is the video card, which is this pink guy right here. Of course, as you might suspect, its main job is to take the information coming from the computer, convert it into information that a monitor can read, and the monitor turns that into visual information. Of course, this guy down here at the very bottom is the sound card for this particular unit. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you can figure out what the sound card does. These, of course, are your CD, DVD drives, things like that. In the case of my computer, the upper one is the DVD player, or DVD-ROM, and the lower drive is a CD burner, referred to as a CD-RW. The hard drive, in this case, lives over here. And another big major component about computers, and what helps control them, is your RAM. In this case, I've got 2 sticks of RAM. My computer carries about 512 megabytes, laughable with today's standards. But yes, my computer runs on 512 megabytes. And there's 2 sticks of RAM, which means each of these sticks are about 256 megabytes of RAM. Now, the big thing, and what confuses a lot of people, is people ask, you know, when I'm upgrading my computer, what components do I need to upgrade and make it go faster? Well, there's a lot of things that determine performance of a computer. But ultimately, it boils down to this. Your processor, to a point, it just determines how fast the computer can process information. Now, back in the 90s, they were developing by leaps and bounds almost every year. But these days, they're still very fast, and they're still developing, but not quite to the leaps and bounds that they once were. Basically, what I'm seeing is the overall speed is the same, the speed of the processor, but now a lot of manufacturers are looking at how many processors can you fit on the motherboard. At first it started out as hyper-threading, where it was 1 processor, but they made it as like 2, and then they started making boards that would run like dual-core processors, quad-core processors. I think I've heard of boards even running 6 processors at the same time. But essentially, your processor just determines your overall speed of how fast the computer can run things. Now, you got to be very careful with this though, because another big and huge component determining your speed is your actual RAM. And RAM determines how many things a computer can run at the same time. If you want to put it in human terms, layman terms, think of RAM as like the size of your desk. If you have a very small desk, which in my case my desk isn't too big, you can only do so many things at once because, eventually your desk is going to get cluttered up. RAM is also like that. The more RAM you have, the more a computer can do at one time. Because what the computer's doing is it's taking information, be it, coming from your CD drives, your USB input, or your hard drive or whatnot, and it's trying to process it. But because of the operating system, it's processing more than one thing at one time. So that's where your RAM comes in. Basically, the RAM allows the computer to grab different bits of data that it needs at any one time to run whatever programs you're trying to run. So the more RAM you have, the more efficiently it can do it. So a lot of people say, well, the more RAM I have, the faster I can go. To a point, yes, but really it just means the more your computer can do at the same time, which does, in the end result, give you feeling that it is going faster. So far your processor just determines how fast you can work. Your RAM determines how much your computer can do at one time. Another big component with video computers these days is the video card. As we all know, especially gamers out there, you love these games with the incredibly high graphics and things of that nature. Well, you're not going to be able to run it on just a standard VGA I/O port off the motherboard. The motherboard, the video cards that are built into the motherboards do not have the capacity or really the ability to run the high-end graphics that these games demand. Thus the reason for the add-on video card. The newer your video card, the more high-end it is, the more it can do. Graphics are very demanding on the system, so the newer the game you want to play, the more intensive it is, the more you're going to have to invest in the graphics card. I mean, some of these cards are so fancy that they literally even have their own set-aside RAM and their own processor just to help run the graphics alone. And your hard drive, just think of it as your bookshelf. Your hard drive just literally stores information for your computer to access and run. So the more space you have, the more programs you can hold. That's pretty much all of your components. I'll kind of go in and help you guys a little more understand the computers. What essentially happens is when you're running the computer, like I said, you've got the power supply feeding power to all the components. When you power on a computer, the motherboard kicks on. And almost every computer will run what's called a post, a power on self-test. That's where it goes through, and it just checks, the motherboard checks itself out, makes sure everything's hunky-dory, things like that. And then, the computer, there's a BIOS chip, it's called BIOS. It's a little memory card right on the motherboard that tells the motherboard, it has the program to run the post, but it also tells the computer itself where you're going to draw your information to run, like where you're going to run the programs from. So it tells the computer, okay, you're wanting to boot up, you need to go to either the CD drives, the newer computers can read off the USB drive, the floppy drive, which, believe it or not, I still have a 3.5-inch floppy on my computer, or the hard drive. Once the computer starts reading from the hard drive, it's basically taking the data stored on the hard drive and running it. If your operating system resides on your hard drive, all your games, all your programs, and stuff like that. So essentially, it kind of goes in a flow. Power to the motherboard, so it can do its post, and then it relies on the hard drive for the programs, and it also uses other inputs, such as, like I said, your CD drives, your floppy drive, and USB ports, things like that, to gather information. And that, my friends, is pretty much the nuts and bolts of how a computer works. Before I cut you guys loose from the video, I wanted to kind of re-summarize the end part about how I was discussing the interaction with the motherboard and the components. The motherboard, like I said, is the central nervous system to your computer. It takes information primarily from the hard drive, but from other sources. And using the RAM and the processor, your memory and the processor, it runs the programs that the user requested to run, which includes the operating system, the games, and stuff like that. All that information is run from, the hard drive, CD drives, USB inputs, into the motherboard, through the RAM, the processor, and it's run within the system, and basically your end result either comes out like either to your printer, your video sources, what have you. So it's kind of like an input-output in that way, like your hard drive, your CDs, and your USB drives input data. The motherboard allows the components inside the computer to process it, and your end result comes out either to your monitor, your keyboard, or your monitor or your printer or whatever else you need to pull information on, per se. So hopefully that'll summarize it, and I'll go ahead and kick it back to myself so we can wrap up this video. Computers. They take electricity and let us do all sorts of fun things with them. I hope this information was helpful and hopefully even a little bit entertaining. Of course, I am Chris for Chris Country. You can visit me at my Facebook page, Chris Country, or of course feel free to rate, comment, and subscribe on my YouTube channel. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we will catch you on your next video. See ya.